support any.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Malcolm. Thanks so much. Please note that this event is recorded. You're welcome to change your names, leave your camera off, and send private messages to one of our facilitators if you wish to remain anonymous throughout the event. The reason why we decided to record this event is for the people who can't really attend the event and they wish to be part of the discussion, but they can't for some reasons. So it's for them to watch and to engage with the dialogue at their leisure. If any unfortunate event, like any technical issue happens during the event, emails will be our point of contact to reach you. So we will make sure to get in touch with you via your emails. So do keep an eye. Sana Rizvi will write down the key ideas and messages of the event on the Google Doc. So as you know, there is a Google Doc circulating during the event to jot down the most important messages, themes, reflections of the event. Sana is doing an amazing job behind the screen, and we can commend her excellent multitasking skills. And I hope Sana is here. Hello, Sana. Just to say a quick word of introduction.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. I'm Sana Rizvi. I'm a lecturer at the Graduate School of Education at University of Exeter, and I'm super excited about this event, which has been arranged by Carol and amazing Riyadh. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Sana. Ooh, I think I'm having trouble here. Yeah, thank you so much, Sana. The last point is very crucial. This event is a safe space for dialogue. So respect, care, and love are key foundations, let's say, in a decolonial movement to keep the momentum going and to keep the dialogue and to sustain the dialogue. So these are some of the house rules for this event. The schedule, we had a quick introduction. After that, there will be, and you are encouraged to send your questions, reflections using the chat box, because right after this, there will be a Q&A session with Pravini Baboeram for about 30 minutes. And Pravini is here to answer your questions and to engage with us in this dialogue. I can't see Pravini, but I'm sure she's here. Hello, Pravini. Hello, Pravini. Very, very nice to see you. And thank you so much for accepting to be part of this stimulating dialogue with us. And it's such a privilege to have you today. So thanks so much for coming to the event today. Maybe a very quick word of where you are calling us from, and maybe a very quick overview of the Uprising and what you do in general.
Yes, thank you so much, Riyadh, also for hosting this and organizing this and for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Pravini Baboeram, and I'm an artist activist. I made this film because I wanted to offer a decolonial perspective on anti-racism and colonial history. And I think also in this context, it might be also good to mention that this is something that I do besides my work. So I always say this is the night shift, and my day shift is related to an NGO where I work as a professional, where I focus on diversity and inclusion in higher education. So I'm also very much familiar with diversity and inclusion policy. And this is actually also the reason why I wanted to make this film, because I started to experience sometimes the limits of diversity and how that relates to decolonization. So I'm also very curious to hear your thoughts and experiences on that. And I'm based in the Netherlands, so I'm calling from the Netherlands, and look forward to the conversation today. Thank you. And I think Riyadh has to unmute.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks so much, Pravini. Very happy to have you today. So we will be starting with the Q&A session for about 30 minutes. So yeah, I hope you did watch the Uprising, and I was telling colleagues how the Uprising is amazing and incredible in terms of the message, the history, and the colonial legacy that projects in the documentary through the narratives of the academics and activists. So yeah, Pravini is here with us today. If you've got questions, reflections, comments, anything that you'd like to speak about, to highlight, a feeling that you'd like to share, a perspective that you'd like to provoke, please do feel free to use the chat box and engage with us in this dialogue, because it's very important for us not only to open dialogue, but also to sustain it for a better world, let's say, and a better understanding of history, present, and future.
And while people are maybe coming up with questions, it might be nice also maybe to share a little bit about how this film came to be, just to give you an idea of what led to this piece. I will briefly share a little bit about the process and give you also time maybe to reflect while I share this. So as you have noticed, the film is what I would call a music documentary. So the music is very central to the film, and actually the music came first and then the film. So actually I think 3 years ago, I started writing a new album because before making this film, I was mostly focused on music as a musician with my band. And as a musician, I was in the process of becoming more and more vocal about my political views, because I also became more and more involved in the anti-racism movement in the Netherlands. And I think a lot of artists from my generation were also struggling with, trying to maintain this commercial appeal to a mainstream audience, while really realizing, how speaking out against racism might affect that commercial appeal. So I made a very conscious decision to be unapologetic about my political views, and started writing these songs that reflected my experience in the movement, and also the analysis that I learned from the people you see in the film. Because with every song that I was writing, I just heard them educating me on these topics. So when I was writing the music, I felt like it was more than just music. It was really a bigger story. And I really wanted to connect the emotional part with the analytical part. So I actually came up with the idea to, because I was used to making music videos, to create a really big piece that had elements of a music video, but was actually a documentary that reflected the experiences and analysis of, people in the movement. So I ended up, coming up with this idea to add this film element, and to offer a journey that connects experiences with an academic analysis. And I knew that it was a very heavy topic. It's a very heavy subject. So the music was a way to make it something that we could go through together, and also end on a positive note, to feel empowered, because I knew that's what I wanted to end with, with people to feel, despite the heavy history, to be empowered by the story of resistance and strength of the people who went before us. So just to give you a brief idea of how it came about, yeah, I look forward to your questions. I already see a contribution in the chat. and it's from Andrea. So if you're okay, I'm going to read it out loud so I can also process and see what comes up. Hello, I absolutely watching the uprising. I felt both inspired and motivated to continue in this decolonial learning. As I was watching, I had moments of anger, learning more about the historical colonial moments. I also had moments of hope in listening to the amazing people who shared their knowledge in the video. I was trying to look for the songs online and was wondering if Pravini has them somewhere so I can listen to them. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing. And indeed, the songs are part of the album, also the Uprising. They're available on iTunes and Spotify, and I think also on YouTube. So if you Google the songs, The Uprising, Pravini, then you should be able to find them. Yeah, and I'm actually also curious to hear what moments made you hopeful in the film and maybe also made you angry. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to share briefly. You can type it. You can also share and turn on your mic. I'm also looking at Riyadh, if that's okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there were several moments, definitely when they were telling the kind of history of how colonialism happened, and how there were historically different decades with different features that racism took, and also different features that that the production of knowledge took as well. It just made me really angry. I guess it just made me very much aware that my own education and my own lived experience coming from Peru is completely embedded in this idea that that part of me, I don't remember who said it, but somebody mentioned something, a part of them that they really weren't so comfortable with. I don't remember who said that, but it was such a powerful moment, and it really made me angry to acknowledge that. And then several moments at the end of the video where they were talking about hope, and they're talking about this solidarity, moments of solidarity. And that's why I'm here as well, because I feel like I really much need that. Definitely where I am in my department, I'm one of the very few people that are interested in this, mainly because of my own positionality. So definitely feel the need to reach out to other people in other parts, and try to engage with other people and connect. Yeah, that is it. Sorry, I'll mute myself.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing that. I also see another question from Helen. What were the practical challenges of making the film? What advice could you give to young people who want to use arts-based and creative approaches to activism? One of the most practical challenges, which I'm sure you can relate to, is funding, because you need resources to make this. And I was actually sharing earlier with the facilitators how I applied for funding, and the funding was denied. So really, I didn't have any funding to make this film, but I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs, and I was used to already taking initiative because as an independent artist, I was already doing that. So I decided to not let the lack of funding stop me from telling this story. And what I did was really go back to the community and see who was willing to contribute. I do have to say I'm in a very fortunate position. Like I said, I don't do music full time, so I have a job that allows me to invest in these types of projects. So I did have my own resources to invest in this film. And I was able to connect people who were willing to contribute to the film within my budget. So in that sense, the advice that I would also give is to really be aware of your own social capital, because everyone who contributed to this film, from the cameraman to the person who did the animation in the film, to, you know, people promoting the film, and also the people, you know, who spoke in the film, were all part of my network. So and we all had a collective goal, you know, to challenge colonial history and colonial legacy. So I was able to call on them and to make this a project that was really something, like I said, by the people, for the people. So in that sense, I would, and sometimes, especially when you're younger, you don't always see that capital that you have. You maybe think that's my friend or that's my family member, but really they're all people with skills and with resources or ideas that you can really use and join forces with. And also another strategy that I always use is to really visualize, you know, what you want to do. I knew with this film, I already saw it in my head before it was executed. And when I explained it to, you know, initially to my family, they were like, "I'm not sure what you're trying to do." So it's music, and then it's film, and then it's you know academics, and it's a lot of you know communities. So for some people, it's hard to visualize. But if you have a vision and you know what you want to do, and you know you have a strategy and a plan of action to work towards that vision, I would say hold on to it, and you know take part of the process as a learning process. I really did a lot myself, the editing, and did an online editing course, you know, to kind of get a feel of what it takes to make this film. Really taking on a growth mindset where if I can't do something today, I can develop myself and make sure that I can do it tomorrow or the day after. So in that sense, to challenge yourself and believe in yourself when you have a vision. So I hope that answers your question, Helen. And I see more questions coming in, so thank you. I'll keep addressing them. Malcolm asks, you have referenced the tensions of being anti-racist, commercial appeal, and creating brave spaces for the colonial dialogue. Could you speak more about this? Yes, I think Black Lives Matter is actually a good example of this tension, because for me, what we're trying to do with decolonial resistance is to bring perspectives that have been pushed to the margins to the center. And I think, you know, Black Lives Matter is a great example where a few years ago, it was considered something in the margins, and it was considered maybe something that was really radical. And the same goes also for the whole discussion on Zwarte Piet, you know, that was addressed in the film, and how blackface was seen. You know, a few years ago, it was considered not done to challenge blackface. Now, because of the work that we've done with the colonial resistance, it's one, part of the center stage, and two, it's now not done to say, oh, all lives matter, or blackface is okay. So in that sense, I think part of the work that we're trying to do is to make those to challenge that idea of what does it mean to have commercial appeal. Now you have corporate industry that wants to support Black Lives Matter. So we can actually influence what commercial appeal looks like. And I'm not saying that that is our goal, but it is a side effect of the work that we do. And if we understand it, then I think a lot of it's also about really decolonizing your own mind, you know, and me understanding that for me, it was liberating to be unapologetic. And it was liberating to not take into account if a white record label wants to sign me or not. You know, if I can do it myself, then I don't have to worry about that. So I think, yeah, for me, it was, besides a resistance part, it was also a liberating part. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Malcolm. And if you have follow-up questions, let me know. And Riyadh asked, you can ask your question to Pravini either using the chat box or follow it up with verbal communication. Meta, I hope I pronounced your name right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Mentions, I absolutely love the film. Thank you so much. And the music. That so strongly accompanied the points made in such a powerful way. Thank you so much for that. I'm curious to know, how has the movie been received, and has it created a dialogue towards structural change in broader society in the Netherlands? So this is very interesting because it depends on where you position the reception of the film. So to give you an example, I submitted the film, for instance, to film festivals. So that's more of the arts and culture sector, right? And it hasn't been received with a lot of attention. However, a lot of educational institutions and grassroots communities that deal with these questions have been very receptive and very have embraced the film. And I was actually surprised, I have to say, by higher education institutions, because they are part of the problem. So in terms of the knowledge production, obviously that has also been addressed in the film. But there are people like yourself who are within those educational institutions and challenge, the knowledge production and challenge the way these institutions have been shaped and how to decolonize these institutions. And in that sense, I think that the film has offered people a resource to talk about it and to analyze it. I have also developed an educational toolkit with activities and exercises that is available for free. So that also offers actual tools for people to engage in these conversations. And what I'm noticing now is that there are a lot of sessions and workshops like this taking place that use the film as a starting point for the conversation, but also as an analytical and theoretical framework, on how to view decolonization. Because I think, especially now, decolonization is almost like a trendy word. A lot of people are toppling statues and are decolonizing the curriculum. But what does it actually mean? How can you look at it from an analytical point of view, and how do you translate the theory to practice? I think those types of conversation are really happening now, and I think the film allows people to both reflect on it from a theoretical point of view as well as the practical part in terms of resistance. So I hope that answers your question, but please let me know if you have follow-up questions.
I think you've got a question from Carol Pravini.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Carol, for your question. Was it always your intention to discuss decolonial activism and racial justice beyond the Netherlands and make the Uprising an internationally focused documentary? Especially in light of what is discussed throughout the narrative about resisting the structural constraints and the conceptual conceits of the nation states. Yes, I always had the intention, sorry, I have to turn off the sound. I always had the intention to make it an internationally focused documentary. That's why I also made it available, involved people from the international context. I did want to focus on the European context. So because speaking from my own experience as a viewer, a lot of the films that I've seen on these issues are very American. It's very US centered, and so we know a lot about the civil rights movement and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and the stories that we learn from, especially in decolonial resistance in Europe, are very American conversations. And what I wanted to offer was a European experience and a European context, and also give a comparative view, between the UK and France and the Netherlands, where, because I'm from the Netherlands, I take that as a starting point. But I really wanted to show how the European context is very particular, especially because we don't have that civil rights legacy like the US. You know, I think in the Netherlands and throughout Europe, there's this idea of color blindness that is not necessarily the legacy in the US. Obviously, you know, they have their own challenges, but I think the biggest challenge for the Netherlands is this idea of color blindness. And what we're trying to do is to be color brave and to put race, you know, in the center of the conversation. Indeed, it was my intention to do so.
Thank you very much. The primary reason why I was also interested in that response from you was because I really felt that your examples, Spark Pete, the work that Denk do in the Netherlands, were actually quite translatable and transferable to other contexts. And I loved the way that you married up those narratives with narratives like Indigènes of the Republic in France, and the ways in which the activisms, the scholar activisms, as well as the on-street activisms, were so closely aligned. I thought that was superb. And it really spoke to the fact that we could be in different localities, in different nation states, in different positionalities, and still be going through those same concurrent experiences, so that we could draw strength from each other and look beyond the nation states and its liminalities to try and find alliances with people in other nations and activists who are doing similar work to us in other parts of the world. So I commend you for that. It was so powerful, and I think it was one of the highlights of the film because it gave us that broad geographical, I'm a geographer, so it gave us that broad geographical spread as well as a temporal trajectory. And I love that spatio-temporal alliance that you created, so thank you.
Thank you so much for that reflection, Carol. And, you know, for me, actually, this was also one of the insights that I've gained, and also part of my own, you know, decolonizing process, because I also grew up with the idea that, you know, the nation state is the only way to shape a society and to, you know, for instance, what Ramon Grossvogel mentions, this idea of a plurinational state. When he mentions that, I was like, wow, okay, so there's an alternative for the nation state, you know, so to really challenge your own, the limits of your own framework of reference, at least for me, was also very much a learning process. So I really enjoyed learning from every conversation that I've had. And I think that actually relates to another question Mette has posed. How did you decide on which people to include and also which countries to include or exclude, if there has been some specific thoughts on that? So really, for me, I knew that I wanted to include the UK and France because of the organizations that were active in those countries, and I was familiar with their work. So Islamic Human Rights Commission in the UK and the Parti des Indigènes de la République in France. And the people that I've interviewed were people who really inspired and empowered me. So when I heard them speak in different at different occasions, I always felt like more people need to hear about this, you know. And the thing is, especially with an academic context, we get together in spaces where we seek out each other, right? So, and we also speak a language that we understand collectively, but sometimes it's also abstract and, you know, for a broader audience, maybe difficult to understand. But the message that the people in the film carry is a message that, you know, if you, for instance, combine it with music, like I wanted to do, can resonate with a lot of people. So I really just chose the people who really inspired me and who offered insights that I found really insightful. And then knew that, and also who also knew each other in that sense. So I knew to a certain extent that the narrative would also be consistent because they share similar analysis. but again, from different contexts. And so I was able to kind of maintain that consistency throughout the film. So I didn't necessarily thought of excluding people, but I really focused on the ones who inspired me on a personal level. So, oh, and I see another question. Do you have any thoughts on how to create this anti-racist resistance across borders in Europe? Well, actually, the people in the film, most of them are part of an anti-racist resistance network. It's called the Decolonial International Network. And Sando Hira is one of the main speakers in the film, is also the coordinator of that network. So they are actually already thinking about how to create this alliance, not just within Europe, but also outside of Europe, and are also very aware of our position in the global north and how that relates to solidarity with people in the global south. So these are all questions indeed that that are part of conversations in these networks. So I believe we have a few minutes left, Riyad.
Yeah,
Nice by now.
we have about 6-7 minutes for the Q&A. Thanks, Pravini, for answering our attendees' questions. I think I've got actually a question. As a student here at the University of Exeter, and as a university student, how we could or how could we connect, with those movements outside the university sphere and bring them into or inside the university place to support dialogue, but also actions in the future, rather than having a fragmented, let's say, movement, if I make sense.
No, for sure. I think there are two ways to go about it. This is speaking from my own personal experience. One is obviously in the digital era, there's a lot of ways to connect with each other online, and there are a lot of movements that have been able to mobilize through the through technology. So in that sense, I would encourage people to find each other online, and on social media is where people also offer the information and to organize or mobilize for certain protests. But I can imagine that is also, maybe feels like, it's online. So you do want that, personal human connection. And what I did was actually to go back into, my own community. So I have, this network of people within the academia, but I also went to, the community events of the Indo-Caribbean community in the Netherlands, where, we focus on, our history and identity. You have on June 5th in the Netherlands, we commemorate the Indian arrival from in Suriname. So there you connect with people who aren't necessarily in academia, but who are professionals in different companies, or maybe even people who are just, stay at home mothers and fathers who just care for, their children, but who are very much engaged in these questions because they want to make sure that their children have it better in this society. So to go into the community and see what drives people, and also people want to connect and people want to contribute. And if you're able to connect that community spirit with the resources and the ideas that take place in an academic environment that tries to shape society, I think that would be a good starting point, because then you're able to connect people with power. And I think that at least that was the approach that I took.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pravini. And I think Mata is excited because she's from Denmark as well. And I think she resonated with your own lived experience and And so, yeah, happy for her to connect with such
Yeah, for sure.
network.
And thank you also, Malcolm, for sharing the link. And also, please feel free to connect with me, and I can always also connect you with Din. But yeah, you're all invited indeed to reach out, connect, and see how we can work together. And I think that's the final question then, Riyad, from Ursula.
We have a question from Ursula.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you speak about the musical aspects of your movie, and I think Ursula joined later for some technical issues, and she want to know, yeah, so can you say anything about how you went about developing this musical work? Just wondered how the ideas articulated in the film came into the artistic process. So
Yes.
that's Ursula's question.
Yes, thank you, Ursula. No problem. So what I mentioned in the beginning was that the music actually came first, and then the film. What I can say about the music is really I just started writing about experiences that I've had in the anti-racism movement. So, for instance, I think one of the first songs that I wrote was "Together," which is the song of chapter 4, where you have that conversation on challenging this narrative, and there was another song where I felt like I had to kind of recover from a setback, and that song was "I Believe" in chapter 7. Sometimes I had an idea to write, and then the band would join in, and sometimes the band came up with a nice musical riff, and I heard a lyric that was related to another emotion in the movement. So in that sense, it was really, in terms of the music, it was a very natural process. And what I knew from the very beginning, that was always something that was very clear to me, was the buildup of the film. So I knew that I wanted to begin with a historical reflection with the song Hurricane that actually shows that resistance has always been part of our story. It didn't begin, with our generation, but it began with the very moment of colonization. And I knew that I then wanted to move to an analysis of how that system came to be and the narrative that legitimized it towards, challenging that narrative, and actual campaigns. And so I knew that I wanted to maintain that build-up, and sometimes the songs came very natural, and sometimes it took a bit more time to make sure that I could verbalize the emotions that I felt for that particular stage in the film. So yeah, that was the process. The music again came first, and I have to say I knew that I wanted to edit the film or the music as the soundtrack, and I knew that I wanted to use the instrumentals, for instance, as a soundtrack for the interviews. But even I myself was pleasantly surprised when I edited the film, and I put the instrumentals under the interviews, and the way that they spoke and the way that the music supported their story also really touched me when I was editing. So sometimes I was emotional while editing because I just felt the power of the music with the words of the people. So in that sense, it was also a very enriching process for me. And I think there's
I think very final question from Carol. You're welcome to read it out loud, Pravini, if you want, and answer it.
If you have time to answer this, in the same way that the scholars featured in the film share examples of key luminaries throughout the struggle who have inspired their own activism, please can you share a few of your own inspirations? As I recall, the list of figures detailed in the film included, among others, Angela Davis, Haj Ali Abdelkader, Bell Hooks, Malama Najima, and Malcolm X, etc. Yes, so actually one of my inspirations is Muhammad Ali. He's known as a boxer, But what I found so inspirational is his strength to use his basically sports career as a platform for social justice, and the fact that he spoke the language of the street, but he had a very, very decolonial analysis that he was able to communicate with a mass audience. The fact that he refused to go to Vietnam, understanding that they were not the enemy, and to actually make the sacrifice in terms of his work, because they took away his title. I think his sacrifice was so important, also to find his solace in Islam, to change his name. I think his journey that was so public. I think a lot of people who would face the challenges he faced today would struggle with that. And the fact that he did that in that period in time, and that he was so he seemed to genuinely care for people, so that just really inspires me to have someone who's basically an athlete, but understanding the importance of his platform, and to take on that role with dignity and pride really inspired me. So yeah, Muhammad Ali. And I was really, really devastated, when he passed away. But at the same time, I saw a beautiful image of him, where they painted a picture where he went to heaven, and then all the people who passed away before him awaited him. And he's I think one of the few people who passed away, when he was older and he was not killed. So the fact that he was also able to live his life, to enjoy his family, I think was also a beautiful thing.
I loved what you said in the film and what you wrote in the film about standing on the shoulders of giants. Yep. And that, I think, is an exemplification of that. So thank you very much for answering that question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pravini, and thanks everyone for sharing your questions, and also Pravini for your honesty and trying to respond to our guests' questions. It's been a pleasure. I'm so sorry. I'd like to say we had some technical issues with the event. Some of the participants didn't get the link to the Zoom event, but we made sure to admit them on time. So apologies about that. Technology sometimes, is not always, it doesn't go all on the right direction sometimes. But yeah, for the Q&A session, I think we are done, and we will be moving to the activities and the breakout rooms. So for activity number 1, I'm just going to remind the attendees with, yeah, just bear with me, sorry. There you go. So for activity number 1, the question is, share a moment in the film that was challenging and I'm going to say it again. Share a moment in the film that was challenging and disrupting for you. Think of a quote, image, or perspective presented in the film, and discuss how this might resonate with your own experience in terms of teaching, research, and activism. So this is the first activity done through breakout. Done through the breakout rooms. We have about 29 participants. So the activity will last for about 30 minutes. So 15 minutes for reflection, discussion with participants, and then you will be automatically redirected to the main house for feedback. So everyone who is willing to share feedback and personal reflections, you're most welcome to do this. So I'm just gonna take a few seconds to divide the whole group into subgroups, and you will be redirected automatically to your room. And then when time is up, you will have the countdown, and then you will be redirected to the main house. I like this term, main house. So 26. Yeah, so there will be, I think, 5 groups, and in each group there will be 5 participants. So fingers crossed, I hope this is gonna work. It's my first time to do this, and I can broadcast messages, and you will be automatically redirected. So see you and chat to you in 15 minutes. One last checking. Recreate. Yes, there you go. Open all rooms. See you in 15 minutes. Hello, Amiro.
Hello, hi, hi, Ria.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. So we are in the next phase of the event.
All right.
Just bear with me, please. Do you want to close? No. Keep breakout rooms open. This is my first time doing that, and I'm literally freaking out.
It's all right. Best of luck, Ria.
Thanks a lot. Can I?
So it's the next phase, I guess?
Yeah, the next phase of the activities. And I'm trying to put you in a group, but were you able to join the group? No?
No, nothing I can do from here.
Okay, I can put you in group 5, مثلا.
Sorry for being late.
No, that's okay.
Email?
That's okay. You can stay here, and then you can be part of the second group. But I'm not sure what's going on. Just bear with me, Amir. I'm so sorry.
Just take your time.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Keep on time. Keep on time. What's going on? We are still waiting for others to rejoin. Right, I think everyone is back to the main house. I hope you had a good discussion and reflection in order to answer or reflect upon the question that we asked in the event, in this activity. Just to carry on with the conversation, I just would like to make a public statement that after I'm done with my PhD, I'll try to do another PhD in how to manage Zoom features. So yeah, that was a bit of a struggle, but we will get there eventually. So yeah, thanks for coming back to the main house. I hope you had a stimulating conversation with your group. So please, the floor is yours if you would like to comment or to say anything regarding the question that was asked to you. So off you go.
Riyadh, I was in room 2. Would you like me to go first?
Yeah. Go for it,
Okay.
Carol.
I was delighted to be in a group with Ursula from the UK and Carletta from the United States, who's researching here. And it was interesting because even as a threesome, coming from different subject disciplines, we had similar experiences of the film. We all felt that the film provided a really good structure for placing our own lived experiences into a wider historical, political, and cultural context. All three of us are researching and teaching in university contexts, and so we felt that the film was instrumental in supporting our work as scholars. If I can mention people by name, Ursula was a scholar with a music education background, and she was talking about doing a lot of work on classical music and working in community-based music projects. And she found the film really insightful for supporting that work on music education, and particularly hearing about Pravini's personal experience as a musician and an artist, and how she created that musical narrative to accompany the scholarly narrative that went along in the uprising. Ursula found it extremely powerful, and we both agreed with her. Carletta, a sociologist from Washington, DC, really found the whole Black European lived experience insightful, particularly as it related to the very different experiences of African Americans in the United States and their political history and their citizenship, their notions of enfranchisement or disenfranchisement as citizens. So that again was a really important and powerful element of the film for Carletta, and one again that I concur with. And all three of us walked away feeling inspired by the film to think and investigate more about decoloniality within our own areas of research. I come from a background in human geography, and as a cultural geographer, I've been working in geography for more than 30 years. And I find myself almost as an interloper within my own subject discipline in the academy. It's a very white, European and elite space. And as a Black cultural geographer, I don't have a home there. So seeing Pravini's film, listening to the narratives of the scholars in that film, which were interdisciplinary and international, gave me a place of safety and gave me a home. And I think that was my takeaway from the film. Thank you.
Very beautiful, Carol. Thank you so much. Malcolm, do you want to go with your
Riyadh.
feedback? You're welcome.
And also, just to say, your facilitation has been amazing, including your technical skills. So thank you. in terms of our group, I think it was group number 1. Really, just to build on what Carol's just spoken about the film just sparking a dialogue which transcends in terms of international context. The group included myself from the UK, 2 participants from the Philippines, and 1 from the United States. We very quickly, and I hope I'm going to say John, you don't mind me saying, John was able to just articulate an experience where he had shown the film to some students, and he spoke of almost the anger that the students felt when they saw parts of the film, because it was material, as Pravini had kind of alluded to in the Q&A, they weren't aware of this colonial discourse, because in their space they've been presented with a particular narrative, and part of the work as scholar activists has to be, yes, provide the provocation, but also provide the route through that provocation into praxis, and as the film alludes to, liberation. And so that was a really, really important thing. In terms of a moment that was challenging or disruptive, I think the Zwarte Piet was really disruptive for those students, and just to see a celebratory mocking of people of color was something that certainly John's students just couldn't accept. What we were really able to do in our conversation is zoom into that particular feature and make references to some of the monuments that exist within our different contexts. So Susanna was able to speak about the way in which the Confederate flag in the United States is fetishized and lauded and celebrated in a way which is, I'm saying, distasteful to many of us. From a UK context, I was able to speak about the gollywog, which very much like Zwarte Piet is a symbol, a toy that children played with, and was a symbol of a major jam label, and is still prevalent in my part of the UK, which is in the southwest of UK, where there are celebrations which are akin to Zwarte Piet. And we were also then, Keel was able to share with us some furore in the Philippines previously, where on television, and excuse my pronunciation, Metista Filipinos would blackface to show the indigenous communities to differentiate indigenous communities of the Philippines. So again, there was some furore around this blackening of skin and the accentuation of features as something that should be mocked, ridiculed, or derided. And so we were very, very quickly able to just focus on the way in which the film was able to really drive home the reality of that mockery, which is normalized in our educational context, and certainly in our cultural discourses within those nations. But it was a fascinating conversation, and thanks to all that participated.
Can I offer some additional reflections, Riyad? I don't know if the time's there.
Go for it, Pravini.
Yeah, I just thank you all for offering these reflections. I wanted to share just two reflections of my own. One is, the aspect of the symbolism, right? So whether it's a Confederate flag or Zwarte Piet or Gollywog, I think one of the things that come up in the conversations around resistance is how do we relate resistance to these symbols, right? So if we challenge these symbols, what does that do for the movement, and what does that do for social change? And there are some people who question the importance of challenging those symbols because we want to change the system. And what I have tried to explain is that, there's the system is very invisible, it's abstract. So, you don't see it, and you don't necessarily feel the or you don't, it's not concrete, so it's abstract in terms of legislation or, knowledge production. But the symbols are visible and you can touch them, so to challenge the symbol is actually to challenge the system, because the system has to respond to the symbol. It has to legitimize and justify why that symbol is there in that specific space. So to understand how that symbol is actually the tip of the iceberg, and by challenging the tip, you actually challenge the iceberg. I think it's very important for people to understand, also to anticipate on the setback that comes after challenging the symbol. Because sometimes people think, well, I'm just, challenging a puppet, right? Or a gem or a flag, but it's not about the flag itself, but the whole history that has been able to position that flag as innocent, and you're questioning that. So that's one. And two is also the anger, because that also came up, in a lot of your reflections, and something that I actually discussed with one of the speakers, or actually one of the speakers shared with me, Roberto Hernandez, who was also in the film. He mentioned, it's important to not just think about what we're fighting against, because this is what makes us angry, right? We're mad and we're angry because of the system that we're fighting against, because of racism and the dehumanization and everything that comes along with it. And he shifted my thinking by saying, but we also have to understand, what are we fighting for? And this is the part in the last phase of the film that tries to imagine a new world civilization, because then it allows you to channel your anger to energy and to transform the anger to strategy. Because I think especially a lot of young people that I speak in the movement, they understand the system and they're angry, but then they stay angry. And sometimes they stay with, well, we're fighting against this. But when I ask them, what are you fighting for? And what does a racism-free society look like? How do you relate to white people in a racism-free society? It becomes much more difficult to imagine, because we grew up in a nation state that is racist. So, and I think this is also something for us, within an educational role, to challenge our communities to imagine, what are we fighting for? What does that look like? And how can we achieve that? And it's an interesting time and space to be in, because you're trying to navigate a reality that is still excluding us, but you're trying to practice a reality that we're trying to shape ourselves, And I think this is an interesting position to be in, but that also allows us to stay hopeful and to stay driven in this fight, because you have a lot of people who are tired, who are experience burnouts, but it's because they're focused on what they're fighting against. So this is also something that I wanted to share. What are we fighting for, and how can we achieve that vision?
Thank you very much, Pravini, for mentioning this. It is very powerful and inspiring, because as someone who watched the Uprising, and I can relate to Andrea's initial reflection, and I'm sure other people felt the same, this anger, and transforming this anger into a positive thing, a strategy, a way to navigate, our decolonial work, but also our positionalities as human beings, where we are coming from and where we are heading towards this change collectively, but not also individually, but also collectively. So thank you so much, Pravini, for the feedback, but also thanks, Malcolm and Carol, for the insightful feedback. For the second activity, I'm just going to share the question here, and you should.
Apologies, Riyad, sorry.
Be able.
Have we heard from the other groups as well?
We haven't, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. So we are hoping those who haven't spoken during this first session of the breakout rooms will be sharing their feedback during the second phase of the activity. So yeah, hopefully there will be more feedback from the other groups.
Thank you.
Thanks for your consideration, Carol. So the second question is, share a moment in the film that was inspiring and empowering for you. Think of a quote, an image, perspective presented in the film, and which has encouraged you to engage with decolonization to shape your own praxis. So you will be redirected to the same group that you were affiliated to. Also, for less than 15 minutes, you will be reflecting on that and then coming back to the main house. All right. So yeah, see you in about 10 minutes this time. Hello, Anne. Hello, Anne. I can't hear you. You're on mute. I can hear you now. Hello.
Sorry, I'm so sorry that I'm late. I was just messaging Malcolm, but he's disappeared off to a group. I was doing a poetry webinar and we ran over. So I thought I'd just come and find out what people are doing.
That's absolutely fine. The event is recorded anyway. So you will be able to watch it after the event is done. We had a Q&A session with our guest speaker, Pravini, and then we had an activity divided into subgroups to reflect on some of the questions. And also now the participants are having another activity. I can assign you to another group just to listen and to engage in a dialogue with them. And the question of the second activity is, share a moment in the film that was inspiring and empowering for you. And you can link that to your own praxis, be it in teaching, research, or activism. So I'll just assign you randomly to a group. I'll put you in group number 2. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I hope you should be able to join now. waiting for others to rejoin.
I think as time progresses, people have to leave. So it keeps getting smaller and smaller, the group.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think the conversations are also getting more and more rich.
Good, yeah. Yeah, people from room 3 are rejoining. Cool. I think everyone rejoined the main house. Thanks for reflecting upon the second questions that has to do with empowerment and liberation. And you are welcome to reflect upon that and to share maybe some feedback with the whole group, and hopefully we can hear from different people this time.
I was in, I can't remember what the group number was, but I can feedback if that's okay with Salma and Nikki on the moments of that empowered. And but also Nikki or Salma, if you want to share, please feel free. I think Nikki is trying to unmute, and Salma.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's working, yeah.
Go ahead, Salma, if you want to share.
Well, yes, because you did cut off when I was answering.
Yeah, so sorry.
I mean, it wasn't your fault, but yeah, we were kind of talking about what was her name when she said that you have the choice of not being white anymore, in a sense. And we talked about that, Nikki and I, after that, like, what does it mean to be a white person standing in solidarity, and what are the reasons for doing so when you personally are not affected by it? Like, why give up your privileges? I personally have the experience of being labeled as a white passing person of color. So obviously I do not fit the status quo of looking like your usual Muslim Arab person. So it's also hard, because it's also like you do realize that you're not as visible as your comrades when you're walking on the streets. So it's also this question of how do you use this privilege to also help your community. And yeah, Nikki, if you would like to share about your personal experience.
Yeah, and I shared that I really liked the idea of that statement, that I thought it was really powerful. And also, like, at the beginning of it, like, what does that look like, or how does that, how do I make that happen? And talking about using our privilege in ways to speak out and be activists. And then also I was sharing too, like, not wanting to then dominate the spaces either, but finding a balance of using the privilege in positive ways.
Thanks a lot, Selma and Nikki, for those reflections. Maybe somebody else who would like to share his or her feedback regarding the second question, probably. But I do acknowledge towards the end of the uprising, I felt differently. I had different feeling and a different perception, but also it gave me a different avenue about what decoloniality is. And I think one of the speakers did mention that decoloniality is an analysis of mechanisms. And I liked that. I liked this way of putting it. And as I was saying to Andrea and Amira, decoloniality remains a choice. and it should come from a place of love, care, and ethics, and trying to embrace plurality and celebrate different voices that have been suppressed and silenced for decades or centuries. And I think decoloniality tried to bring those voices up to the surface and try to celebrate them equally and learn from them. So, and I think that was really empowering in the movie. And there was another speaker who said, decoloniality is walking, we ask questions. And that's such a beautiful statement. When we walk, we should always keep asking questions. And I think decoloniality is a reflexive process of self-questioning, but also questioning and unpacking taken for granted assumptions and how knowledge is constructed. So this is my takeaway, my reflection on that particular question. We have Kiel. Kiel is a PhD student based in Sweden, and she was in group 1. Kiel, do you want to read out loud what you've written, or you're happy for me to read it?
Yes, I can read it.
Thanks, Kiel.
During our discussion earlier, I mentioned, because I kind of forgot already most of the documentary since I watched it a couple of weeks ago, but I wrote some notes, and this is one of the things that really resonated with me, that there was some kind of lack of intersectional representation among the scholars who were interviewed. They were at least I noticed they were mostly male scholars, and I was thinking there's this need of highlighting the voices of women of color scholars as well as LGBTQ scholars in terms of colonialism and decolonization, because gender and sexuality and they're very important in the discussion of colonial histories and the process of decolonization as well. Yeah, that's all.
Can I respond to that, Riyad?
Go
Thank
for
you,
it.
Akil, also for that reflection. I think in that sense, there's also a conversation on intersectionality, right, within the decolonial movement and how that relates to decolonization. And I think, for me, I really made a conscious decision to focus on race. And in that sense, to have the representation, which was a very deliberate also balance between men and women, because we have a lot of women of color speaking in the film. And I, as a filmmaker, obviously I'm a woman of color. So in that sense, that is the main voice that is speaking. So I do want to address that. But again, to really focus on the racial aspect, because what I find happening in conversations that take on an intersectional approach is that it sometimes shifts away the conversation from race. And this is speaking from a Dutch context, so I have to position it within the Netherlands, where when we take on that intersectional approach, it becomes about gender. It becomes about LGBTQ+, and then we don't talk about race anymore. And this is the big frustration for a lot of people of color in the Netherlands, is that there's a very deliberate intention to erase race from the conversation. And I think in that sense, intersectionality is also often used as a tool, to acknowledge indeed how oppression can take place in different dimensions. But it is an approach that focuses very much on the individual, because the intersection takes place on an individual level, where this conversation in this decolonial framework really talks about the communities that are based on this exclusion related to race. So I think this conversation on how it relates to other dimensions of diversity or identities is an important part of this conversation, and I want to thank you for addressing this, and hope that my reflection also offers a contribution.
Thank you, Pravini. Thanks, Keel. We still have 10 minutes. If people are happy to share their feedback, any reflection, any comments before we conclude.
Riyadh, is it possible for me to say something again? I know I spoke during the first feedback.
You are welcome to say anything, Carol. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Just in terms of the group that we were in, group 2, my colleagues Colette and Anne and myself, we all liked the idea that the film crossed many generations and also crossed many geographies. And I think there were so many areas of commonality, particularly with regard to this notion of erasure. And so we felt that it was important to, in whatever learning environment we were in, whether we worked in academia or outside of academia or in educational organizations or not, we all had to be mindful of learning and opening our minds to finding out more about our respective histories, and then telegraphing and amplifying that in whatever contexts we work in. Both of the people that were sharing their thoughts with me gave really powerful and poignant testimonies about their own lived experiences, both in terms of Irish history and also in terms of African American history. And I think that by sharing those kind of narratives in forums like this, we all learn and grow from that. And that's one of the big takeaways that I take from this experience, because the film was not only informative in and of itself, but it's a catalyst for further dialogue, further activism, and further learning and growth. We're all in a state of becoming, and that was something that really came across in the feedback in this second session from Group 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Selma just wrote something. Selma, are you happy for me to read it, or you're very welcome to read your statement if you want, of course.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just typed it because we are running out of time. But yeah, Sanat and Nikki were also there at the very last minute, and we, or at least one of the most kind of things that really ended on a really great note for me was this thing about like fighting hate with love. And I'm just going to read what I wrote. The growth Malcolm X has went through since his phase from Nation of Islam, up to him saying that he, so to speak, no longer hates white people, which is a very good reminder for me personally to not perpetuate the same colonizing strategies and educating and conversing with each other. So yeah, I think just to end this on a positive note, I think that's something that I'm gonna really take with in the future with me.
Thank you so much, Selma. And I did share a similar perspective with my group as well. I was with Andrea and Amira, and we did speak about this notion of love and as a strategy to use. Kerry, are you happy to comment on your statement?
Yeah, I mean, just to reinforce the point that in our group as well, we talked about how you go about loving your enemies and how difficult but perhaps necessary that is. And there was also another point from Meta, I don't know if you want to share your point about lack of resource around resistance and a portrayal of people being passive. I think that was a really important point. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's just the point shared in the video or in the film about so when we speak of for example colonization, that we speak also of the resistance. So it's not only portraying people who were enslaved, for example, as victims who were suppressed and passive, but also that we remember to portray the resistance. And then we just talked about, I work in the ground schools, I work with children, right? And it's so difficult to find these resources, right? So it tends to be this approach where I kind of feel like I suppress these kids further because they see themselves always portrayed as these passive people who just kind of like accepted what was yeah, what they experience, right? Yes, I really like that point and that focus.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mata. And just to speak about lack of resources, I hope the attendees will use the Uprising as a resource in their teaching, but also in their research and activism, with, of course, acknowledging the source, who is Pravini, who produced this brilliant movie and shared it with honesty and openness with us. So yeah, I think the Uprising can be a new avenue for us as PhD students, academics, teachers, parents, friends, activists, musicians, to learn from it and also to share it with our community in order to unpack and to unlearn what we've been constructing as knowledge and ideas throughout the years, and take a new perspective and engage with decoloniality, as I said it earlier, engage with it as an analysis of mechanisms and walking while asking questions. So I think this is an empowering statement, but also a movie. I think we reached the end of our event right on time. I do apologize again for the technicality and my lack of skills in terms of managing groups and multitasking. Yeah, see, I can't really multitask, and I think Sana is brilliant in that. So Sana beat me on that. So really happy to have had this discussion with you, and also those reflections. Pravini, we thank you so much, and we are most grateful to your time, care, efforts, and openness to answer all the questions with enthusiasm. We hope you did enjoy the event, and we hope the Uprising taught you something positive, though the frustration, the anger that might have emerged at the beginning. And do not forget, we are a community that tries to learn and do better as individuals, to shape our society, to shape our praxis, but also our surrounding. On this note, I wish you a very nice evening, and I hope we can see you next time in our future events with Decolonial Dialogues or REAN, and I will promise you that I will improve my technical skills. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks a lot, and we hope to see you very soon. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. You take care.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Pravini.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.